Last class we were excited as we saw Ezekiel approaching the temple from the south or from the north, however you want to read those verses, and he saw this frame of a city. And we were excited as we saw Ezekiel, as he walked closer to this, saw that man in the gate, and saw this incredible big feature there. He's never seen anything like it. The last time he was in Jerusalem, it was a different temple completely. And he sees this in vision. The whole graphic of the land has changed. And Ezekiel sees a wonder in Zion, where Yahweh will stamp his feet and make it glorious. And we looked up and back with Ezekiel. We walked around the 1.6 kilometres this way, 1.6 kilometres that way, and we looked at and measured a few things. We peered through the lattice. We saw the little runner chambers, which maybe are lifts to the different levels, and we were impressed with this house of prayer for all nations. You might remember I showed a slide of Solomon's temple compared to this. Does everybody remember that slide? Which took thousands and thousands of people to build over a period of, how many years was it? Yeah, 7 years. So you imagine with Solomon's temple, it's just a little speck compared to Ezekiel's temple, how many people and how much effort is going to be required to build this. And we were impressed with Ezekiel, as Ezekiel at times was quite dumbfounded when he saw these things. Just to impress you with these things, there's some dimensions of the gate in which we looked at. I did run over it very quickly last time, but it just gives you some details of the height and the width of one gate that leads into this temple. What I've done there is I've actually put in brackets metres after all the dimensions, so you can see I've got metres. We've got metres there and a verse, metres and a verse. If anybody ever does get a copy of these slides, it's there for you. And when I've done my marking here, I've got the verse right there. I know how big it is, and I can take myself straight to the verse. It's there. Perfect. And all those sizes are there in our verses, and we can read them, even though sometimes we read it and we get blinded by the cubits and the reeds, and it's a bit confusing. Well, it's there in pictures, and hopefully that gives you some size or height to it. You might think, well, that doesn't really mean much to me, Rick, Anthony, whatever, What does that mean? Well, let's just put it in perspective again. There's the gate from front on. 7 stairs that leads up to the gate. There's a little man standing in the gate there, the one that helped Ezekiel measure everything. That's the size of which hall do you reckon that is? Excellent. Okay. One Tree Hill Hall, not to be outdone by Cumberland Hall. Okay, so that just gives you some idea. Just one gate that leads into Ezekiel's temple. Well, it's not Ezekiel's temple, it's Christ's temple, God's temple. But the one that Ezekiel measured gives you some size and appreciation as to how many people are going to be travelling in and out of this temple every day. Brother Henry Sulley thought about 2 million people. We're going to do a bit of maths a bit later on and just see how that all works out. But that just gives you some idea. None of this is willy-nilly sort of made up stuff at all. And remember, we made a few quotes from Brother Sulley last time, where originally his first few ideas of Ezekiel's temple, he screwed them all up, threw them into the paper bin and started again, because he said something is not right here. And initially he might have had a design like my NIV study Bible that looks a bit like Solomon's temple. Henry Sulley screwed it all up and said, no, I need to start again. And the ideas that he came up with here were totally different from what he had in the first place. And he put strict scientific ideas into this, and he made sure every word was accountable. And he had some excellent study plans for this. It's funny, like this is a little building, isn't it? And we're going to go through lots of size, and we're going to lots of different posts and lots of different things. But really, it's not so much about the building, it's just as much about you and me being there. Who wants to be there? Do you want to be there? I want to be there. Well, see, we walk about Zion when we mark well her bulwarks, we tell her towers thereof, we want to be there. And the more you study it, the more you immerse your minds into it, the more it excites you. Every day, even when you're making the lunches, you're going to work, you're doing the mundane things of life, you're mowing the lawn. You want to be in the kingdom. And this study makes you want to do that, brothers and sisters. And it's so reminiscent of that Psalm 27 and verse 4, which we had read this evening, about that one thing. And I'll show it to you on a slide. It's a beautiful psalm, actually. You can go through a few other verses, but it really is, there's only one thing that really matters. We know from Matthew chapter 6, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. One thing, said the psalmist, though an host should encamp around me, though I've got all these trials beset around me, one thing really matters in life. Does it for you? Is there really one thing in your life that really matters, and that's the kingdom? It's a consistent theme, brothers and sisters. Philippians 3 and verse 13, brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but there's one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before. Forget about all those things which are behind. Tomorrow, the past is gone, it's finished. Yesterday is finished. Tomorrow is the future. One thing I do that I might apprehend that. I don't have it now, but I want it. It's one thing. It's also Mark 10 and verse 21. The person said to Jesus Christ, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And he said, I've done all these things. I love my mum and my dad. I respect God with all my heart, soul, mind and strength. But Jesus said, one thing you lack. Sell everything you have and give to the poor. One thing. There's one thing he lacked, which means he wasn't really looking for that one thing of the future. And of course, there's a couple other great quotes along that note as well, and which you can mark down for yourselves. We're going to take our focus to verse 12 to start off with in Ezekiel chapter 40. And under the subheading of latticework and palm trees I've got here, when we get to verse 12, we come across this weird little word called spaces before the little chambers. Now, everybody should remember little chambers were runner chambers, potentially where lifts are, or at least maybe stairwells would take you up to other levels. But he says in verse 12, there's actually a space before those chambers. Let me show you what we're talking about here. As you walk through the gate up those 7 stairs, and you walk through this gate here, and you've got post, you've got post, you've got post, you've got post, then you've got a porch. In between each post is a little chamber, little chamber, little chamber, little chamber on either side. Verse 12 actually says there's a space before those little chambers of 1 cubit. What is that? We believe that space is the same idea as verse 16, where it says, and there were narrow windows to the little chambers. When it says narrow windows in verse 16, Rotherham translates it lattice work. Lattice work, or latticed windows, Rotherham actually says. And it seems to indicate that in front of these little chambers is this 1 cubit, which is about this thick. So I don't know if anybody's got a pergola at home. You have lattice work maybe on your pergola with vines growing on it. Usually lattice work are only about 1 inch thick. There's quite a big thick piece of, not brick, it's stone, isn't it? So that's quite big, isn't it? So in that section there, those little chambers, which are 6 cubits wide, and we've actually, we did it once in Ecclesia, we actually spread out 6 cubits wide and broad, and we fit about 70 people inside it. So if it's a lift, you could almost fit 70 people in it. But in front of it, there's this little cubit there, blocking entrance to get into it. Why? Why would that be? Has anybody got any idea why there'd be something blocking access to what potentially could be a lift to the other stories? Uncle John, you can't answer this. Any logical reason why you wouldn't have access to a lift in the gate? Excellent. Okay, safety. How many people are going to be walking in and out of this temple every day? Maybe 2 million people. You imagine the congestion as people walk up here and you've got 1,000 people all trying to access this area in here. And as we know from later on in Ezekiel, it says people who walk in from one side up the south will go out through the north. Those who come through the north, see the north up there? They'll come back down through the south. So people have to have easy access and safety through these gates. So I reckon people will actually walk through here. If they need to go up to the other levels, they'll actually walk around past the porch into the pavement area, back through here and access those either lifts or those stairwells on the inside. There's this beautiful lattice work there in front of it. I say beautiful because what do you usually put on lattice work? Vines. So all the pictures that we see of Ezekiel's temple, which are usually just stone and bland looking pictures, it's going to be full of vines and flowers and greenery and shrubs and all those things. And so what you'll be able to do is actually, as you walk through these gates here, you'll actually be able to peer through the lattice and through the vines, and you'll actually see the lifts, maybe through to the corridors and all those things. Just give you some imagination of what's happening in this place. Perhaps if we put that picture there, it gives you a bit more idea of the shrubbery and the vines and everything that will happen and be built around this place. In fact, I imagine everything's going to grow really quickly in the kingdom age. People are going to live a lot longer. So I imagine there's going to be greenkeepers, a whole host of greenkeepers throughout the whole temple. And there's going to be scaffolding everywhere. And those who have got green thumbs that love gardening, you could be gardening in the temple for eternity. Imagine that. No, of course, no, we're going to be kings and priests, so we're going to be organising those things. But you imagine that. There'd be people everywhere. So while there's worship, while there's singing, while there's all these things happening in the temple, sacrifice, there's gardeners up there trimming away, someone down with a basket catching, whatever's going to happen. And it is amazing just to think about these things and immerse our minds in the life and vitality of this place. So that little space seems to be something that blocks that access. Just another view. This is Henry Sulley's pictures, of course. And so you can imagine in between all these arches, all the way up and down, is this lattice work, and there's vines growing everywhere. Huge. And how high did it go? Did everyone remember that other slide where I had the dimension of how high it was to the top of the arches? 38 metres. So 38 metres high, as there's vines growing. So scaffolding everything to actually do the trimming every day is incredible. It really is. Just turns me to Isaiah 60 in verse 13. This is a sensational chapter. Isaiah 60 is telling us about the amount of people that are going to be travelling to the temple every day. Perhaps Isaiah 60 is actually telling us about one particular day, the inauguration of the temple. Whatever it is in Isaiah 60, everybody is coming up to the temple. A great little theme to colour in Isaiah 60 is that word come. It's in verse 3, the Gentiles shall come. At the end of verse 4, the word come occurs twice. They shall come to thee, thy sons shall come from far. So Jerusalem, like a mother, is going to have all her children coming back to Jerusalem. At the end of verse 5, the forces of the Gentiles will come to thee. The middle of verse 6, we've got all the camels and all the dromedaries, which are young camels, shall come and bring gold and incense. So everybody's travelling on camels to the Holy Land. The middle of verse 7, all the flocks of Kedar, etc., are coming up with an acceptance, perfect offerings. Everybody's coming up to this place. Why? Why is everybody coming to this place? Yes, it's a house of prayer for all nations. We'll look at verse 13. The glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, the box together. Why? To beautify the place of my sanctuary. The word beautify means to embellish or to gleam. It's the same word beautify in Psalm 149 and verse 4, where God will beautify the meek with salvation. He's going to embellish this place of all these things that he's made, all these trees and all these vines, to make the place of my sanctuary beautiful and the place of my feet glorious. The word glorious means to be heavy or weighty. It's like in Corinthians where it talks about our salvation is like an eternal weight of glory. You know, and this place, all the wealth of the nations will go to this place and be embellished with God's beauty. And it says there that God's feet will be glorious. Where's the kingdom of men's feet at the moment? All through Europe, and they're going to be standing in that same place. Daniel chapter 2. Where's Christ's feet in Armageddon? Zechariah 14, on the Mount of Olives. Where's God's feet embellishing that very same place? And God just has this lovely phrase, doesn't he, of embellishing what man has destroyed and what man wrecks today. God will embellish and beautify. So let us, brothers and sisters, imagine past the stones, look past all the bland pictures that we see, and imagine that this place beautified by God himself. Creepers and vines, protection and beauty to the house of God. Lattice work everywhere, all around the posts, all around the arches, beautifying this place. Now just come back to Ezekiel 40. There's another excellent little thing here as well. Another little term here in verse 16. of Ezekiel 40. There's narrow windows, so the latticework to all the little chambers and to the posts within the gate round about, and likewise to all the arches. So it is everywhere, like the picture shows. Windows are round about and inward, and upon each post were palm trees. I just want to think about that word palm trees for a moment. Now, I don't believe this is literal palm trees. I reckon it's posts that are inscribed like palm trees. How big are these palm trees? Well, they're actually 6 cubits. So if I folded this all the way out, that 6 cubits is about 3.6 metres. That's quite a big diameter. That's quite a big width for a palm tree. I'm not sure if palm trees actually get that big. Definitely a couple of metres. But what it seems to be is posts. Actually, think of it, if it was a real palm tree and it's on that wall that we talked about last week, that's a mighty big pot plant stand, isn't it? So I think this is more talking about a post that is inscribed to look like a palm tree. And if that is the case, as well as all the cherubim around the temple itself, you imagine how busy people like Aholiab and Bezaleel are going to be in the 40 years leading up until the temple being opened. You imagine stonemasons just chipping away for 40 years, inscribing all these things and beautifying this place. And we have the job of organising that and instructing these people to do that. Incredible brothers and sisters that will be involved in that. So they're palm-like posts all around about this place. So when you see this slide here, so on top of this wall, there's all these posts which will be inscribed to look like palm trees. Why? Now, Psalm 92 verse 12 says, the righteous shall flourish like the palm tree. You know, palm trees can live for about 100 to 150 years, and that's a symbol of eternal life. In the kingdom, mortality will be extended and prolonged. We'll live forever. So whenever we approach this place, brothers and sisters, we see those palm-like posts there, we'll be reminded that we've been given immortality. We have it. We have prolonged life in the kingdom age and beyond. And palm trees are strong and stable. No matter how hard the wind blows, the palm trees, they're built to stay upright. Very stable despite strong winds. And it's like us, brothers and sisters, in the truth. Winds might blow and different theories and things come our way, but we need to stand strong in the last days. And every time you approach that temple, you'll be faced with those strong palm trees, upright, the righteous man who survived and stood fast until the end. The foliage of a palm tree is at the top, where our minds are centred. Our minds direct the rest of the body. And it's our minds, brothers and sisters, of course, with our heart, which we love these things, and it directs us and it makes us walk uprightly. And what a fitting description it is to have these palm-like posts standing there, 3 on each side. Actually, sorry, not 3. It's actually, if I go back, how many is on each side? I think it's 4 actually. 4 on each side. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 on each side, reminding us of our life in the truth today and whether we were upright. I suppose you could actually argue and say we were upright because we are there. So it definitely is a reminder of God's graciousness to us and our fighting for the truth in the last days. Now, up the top of all these posts, these palm-like posts, is this arch, which actually says in verse 16 as well, all the arches round about. Every post is connected by an arch. Why? It gives it strength. So from an architect point of view, you need strength. You need gussets, or you need something to actually make this stronger. Well, in the lesson type, it's actually us. Upright people connected one to another. We love our ecclesia. Jesus Christ loved the ecclesia and gave himself for it. We're connected together, brothers and sisters. We should never neglect brothers and sisters in our ecclesia. We're all connected together. God chose us all for a reason. And I know, brothers and sisters, we have our issues from time to time with one another, and personal things do happen. But God never makes mistakes, and we're all here for a reason. And we're all connected like those arches are. Strong palm-like trees that we are, brothers and sisters. Connected together, showing forth the praises of God. An ecclesia, ready and waiting for the kingdom of God. It's a lovely picture of the outer gate and those walls. So the question is, how many gates were there? Do you reckon there's only one gate per side, or do you reckon there's a bit more than that? Anybody have a stab? How many gates do you reckon there were? 4 gates. Okay, that's a good stab. Try a little bit more. Oh, did I say tonight? Say 9? Okay, if I said 9, then I reckon there's either 9 or 11 on each side. Okay, and I'll prove that in a minute. Okay, I thought I said that last class, actually. You're listening to it. Yeah, so you actually heard it, so there you go. Excellent. Okay, well, how many gates were there? Well, let's view it from a distance. We know from Ezekiel 47 that there is water coming out from underneath the gates. Okay, so this picture is a pretty good picture. In fact, that's on the south side. We believe it's also on the north side as well. The water only seems to come down the south side. That's what Ezekiel 47 says, but I wouldn't be surprised there's water coming down the north side as well to water the north side where water comes out. But as you can see, nonetheless, there's water coming out from under each gate. And we believe that there's 9 to 11 of them. Let's prove it. And this proves that there's lots of people that go throughout this place. Right, let's go to... Actually, before we do that, Ezekiel, to prove that he actually saw that there was 9 to 11 gates, he actually walked through inside and came to this large pavement on the inside. And then he looked back and he saw, wow, there's all these sections everywhere. And there's a gate in between each one. When he saw that pavement there, brothers and sisters, how big the pavement do you think that is? Well, what's that a picture of? Cumberland Hall. Excellent. So I did show that last week. That pavement that he was on, when he walked through the gate, turned around and looked back again, and that whole pavement that he was on is about 60 metres wide. Be from about the road to the back of your car park. And Ezekiel walked in there, brothers and sisters, and he looked back at those gates, and perhaps he saw myriads of people that we could imagine ourselves, being there, meeting people of all ages, all generations, mingling in their place, ready to worship or ready to help other people, maybe being a tour guide to help other people throughout the temple to see where they're going to. Incredible. And Ezekiel looked back and he saw a number of gates. That pavement, 1.6 kilometres either side, 1.6 kilometres that way, 1.6 kilometres that way, square. And you imagine just how many people inhabit this place, except for the eastern side, where it's only immortals, only us will be there. Imagine the possibilities of the people you'll meet. And I think I did say last time, didn't I? You might bump into someone after 900 years into the kingdom. And you'll bump into someone and say, I've never seen you. Where have you been the last 900 years? And you've got so much to catch up on. What age did you live in? What did you do in life? How did you survive until the end? How exciting is that, brothers and sisters, to appreciate that? You'll never be bored in the kingdom, or yawning, or disappointed. So Ezekiel's on that pavement. Perhaps there's activity around him, and he looks and he saw in verse 17. Then he brought me, so that man of brass brought me into the outward court, and lo, there were chambers and a pavement made for the court round about. So that's the pavement that he's on. And there were 30 chambers round about the pavement. Now that word chambers means sections. It's probably the best way to describe it as sections. Henry Sulley calls it, gives it the Latin word of celle, C-E-L-L-A-E. I like the English sections. So he saw 30 sections. Now you think, hang on. Okay, did he see 30 sections on each side? Or did he see 30 sections over the 4 sides? And you think, hang on, that actually doesn't work out, does it? 4 divided by 30, it doesn't work out as a whole number, does it? And the way the maths works out, if you actually had 30 sections on one side, it'd be all gates. So it actually has to be 30 sections over a certain amount of sides. Well, good highlighting practice for you, if you want to, over the next week, is to colour in the words east, north, south and west in this whole chapter. And what you'll find out, and I'll show a chapter breakup later on, is he never goes to the western side to measure anything. Only once just to measure the length of it, but never measures anything. So Brother Sulley reckons, and I think this is pretty good logic actually, if Ezekiel only went down 3 sides, actually I did that wrong, didn't I? North, east, and actually I'm going west for you, aren't I? We'll think the other way. 30 over 3 sides equals how many sections a side? 10. And if you've got a corner tower in the corners, you've either got 9 gates or 11 gates, 10 sections. This will give you a top view just so you can appreciate this a bit more. So there's your section, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and a gate in between. And if you put a gate next to the corner tower, you actually get 11 gates. And that gate, which we showed earlier, is quite huge compared to our hall. And if Henry Sulley is right, that 2 million people go here a day, you're going to need that many gates for people to walk in and walk out, to have access, to have safety, and for people actually to enjoy themselves. I mean, you ever been to a theme park and it takes you 2 hours to get onto a ride? It's ridiculous, isn't it? You know, so this place is built for access. It's built for worship. It's built for people to enjoy God and what He has made and worship Him. And so there's 30 sections, and they only ever measured 3 sides in detail, never measured the western side in detail. So there's 10, there's 10, there's 10. Just to make it look nice artistically, I suppose, we assume there's another 10 on the 4th side. That's the best logic you're going to get from me for that. And it makes sense. So when you go through the rest of this chapter, he never measures anything in detail on the western side, but we assume it's there as well. So in verse 17, he says, he saw 30 chambers on those 3 sides, separated by that pavement. Therefore, there must be 9 or 11 gates on each side. Does everybody follow me? If anybody wants to ask a question, hit me now. If I don't get it, Uncle John will answer it. Everybody's happy? Uncle John, you're happy? He's got the thumbs up. That's excellent. Good. Now, so you imagine, and this is one of my favourite pictures of Ezekiel's temple. You imagine people as they approach one of these gates. You have to cross the water. You approach this place and there's those sections in between. There's vines, there's trees everywhere. There's Isaiah 60 verse 13 everywhere. The lessons to the mortal population as they approach this place are immense. Even more by us who have immortal minds now to appreciate these things and finally get to grips with the mercy and the wonder of God. Well, today we get glimpses of it, but in the future we'll have it totally with our minds. It really is excellent, brothers and sisters, and imagine approaching this place. Every step brings you closer to the beauty of God. And God, who wants to beautify the meek with salvation, He stamped it with His own beauty, and we'll appreciate this place. Just another little interesting thing. It's fascinating, all these little things, actually. And I've forgotten about this until last night when I was looking at it again. In verse 18, it actually says, and the pavement by the side of the gates. So, gate there, there's a gate there, there's a pavement in between. So we can appreciate that. Over against the length of the gates was the lower pavement. And I've forgotten about this. What's the lower pavement? So he's walked up the 7 stairs, he's walked through the gate, past all the chambers, past the posts. He's out now on the pavement in between. There's another gate over there. But he calls this pavement that he's standing on, where we saw that picture of all those people there, all 1.6 kilometres, and he calls it the lower pavement. Why? Because in chapter 42 and verse 4, when he actually goes back there again, he looked up. He didn't look up this time. He looked up when he came back, and he saw a porch. He actually called it a walk in chapter 42 and verse 4. This is sensational. You know, when you do an open inspection, you know, the wife goes to the kitchen, the husband goes to the shed, you know, the kids go to the bedroom. Everybody goes in different directions. And Ezekiel, it's a bit like that. He sees some things sometimes. It's not until he comes back later on that he sees something else. And if you apply the open inspection process to this, you can appreciate Ezekiel as he's walking through this. And God willing, next week we'll actually show a ripper where Ezekiel's given license to go wherever he wants to. It's quite sensational. And so Ezekiel looks up in chapter 42, and he finally walks back to this area, looks up, and he sees there's a walk. So that means the pavement is the lower pavement. The walkway up there is the upper pavement, or a porchway. So that's a nice little nifty thing to know in verse 18. So make sure you have marked next to that, chapter 42 and verse 4, there is an upper level or a porchway as well. In verse 19, it says this whole pavement runs eastward and northward. And you think, well, hang on, what about the rest? Well, in verse 27, it also says it runs southward as well. And rightly, we assume that it does run westward, although he doesn't actually measure it. So all these directions, he's measured all these same things. And we have this picture, which is quite apt, which looks like that. North, south, east and west, we have this outer court, which has an outer section and an inner section with this pavement in between, which starts from the other side of the road over there to the back of your car park, 1.6 kilometres this way, full of fraternisation, activity, priests, sacrifices being carted from this place to that place, all things happening here. And you just imagine that distance and how many people you could fit in that. And it definitely fits in with what Brother Henry Sulley said. If all the chapels and the churches in the world were combined into one, less the wasted areas, a very large building would be the result. A vast structure of that kind will be required for a centre of universal worship. It's a house of prayer for all nations. That's how Jesus Christ saw it. All nations shall come up from year to year to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. That's what Zechariah said in Zechariah 14. All flesh shall come to seek the Lord of hosts. Unto thee shall all flesh come. The joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion. Now we read quite a few verses, I think from verse 20 through to verse 32. What I'm going to give you now, to actually make the rest of this chapter easy, is the chapter breakup. Because we actually don't need to read much of the rest of this chapter, because the rest is all extremely similar. In fact, where I've got there on my chapter breakup, verse 20 to 23, he measures the outer court north gate. So where he started on the east, and he measures the gate, and he measured all those things, when you get to verses 20 to 23, he measures exactly the same thing on the north side. And when you get to the next section, verse 24 to 27, he goes all the way down, he walks another 1.6 kilometres at least, goes down to the south side, and measures all the same things again. And what he has done this for, and the angel takes him there every single time, is to teach him that it's the same no matter where you go. All the gates are the same. And God does that on purpose so that our minds could actually understand this. Makes it a little bit easier when we get to chapter 41, which is probably one of the hardest chapters in the Bible. So verses 20 to 23 is exactly the same on the north as it is on the east that he just measured. Let's just read a couple of verses. Look at verse 21. Verse 20 we'll start with. And the gate of the outer court that looketh toward the north, he measured the length thereof and the breadth thereof. Okay, fair enough. So he's on the north. Verse 21, little chambers, 3 on this side, 3 on that. So that's the same as back in verse 7 for the east gate. There were posts on the arches after the measure of the first gate. Now what I've done is actually coloured that in my Bible, after the measure of the first gate. Because when you get down to verse 22, he says, again in the middle of the verse, after the measure of the gate that looketh to the east. I've actually coloured that in. And then you get down to the end of verse 24, he says, according to these measures. Now, do you want me to say those again so you can highlight them or whatever? I'll just say it again. It's the middle of verse 21, after the measure of the first gate. Middle of verse 22, after the measure of the gate that looketh toward the east. I'll just highlight in blue. And also at the end of verse 24, according to these measures. Now if you go through a bit further, and I'll give you another one, the end of verse 28, he's on the south gate inner, according to these measures. Also, middle of verse 29, according to these measures. At the end of verse 32, according to these measures. Verse 33 in the middle, according to these measures. And finally in verse 35, and he's finally at the north gate inside, according to these measures. So what we have is an incredible symmetry around this place. What he saw on the eastern side is the same as the north on the outside, same as the south on the outside, same as the south on the inside, same as the east on the inside, same as the north on the inside. They're all the same. So when we see these pictures, And I'll just quickly go to this picture. When we see that picture, we can be confident that is, I reckon, almost spot on. And I know I've gone through it too fast for you, but you have to believe me with most of those things. For those who have studied it, you can appreciate it as well. For those who maybe mark it with those marking notes that Brother Philip has given you, that'll help you a bit more as well. This picture is pretty well spot on, brothers and sisters. The heights, the gates, the sections are all there. And I'll just give you that break up again, so you can finish that off if you want. Just to prove a little bit more, in verse 23 it says, "And the gate of the inner court was over against the gate toward the north and toward the east." Now, what's he mean by the inner court? Now, I'll just go back to this picture again. So what he's saying is, the first gate that he measured was one of these on the eastern side on the outside. Then he measured one on the north side on the outside. Then he goes all the way around here, measures one on the south side on the outside. But as verse 23 says, there's actually a gate across the pavement exactly the same on the inside. Then he goes to the east inside. Then he goes to the north inside. They're all the same. And so when you read through those, all you need is a chapter breakup. They're all the same. They're all the same. And the ones on the inside are a mirror image of the ones on the outside. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, good. Excellent. That's good. Now, there's something really interesting when we get to verse 31. There's actually something here that didn't occur anywhere else. You think, what's this there for? At the end of verse 31, when he goes up to one of these inner gates, it says the going up to it had 8 steps at the end of verse 31 there. So how many steps were there leading up to the outside gate? 7, okay? God's complete number, God's covenant number. What it's saying is when he walked up those steps, went through the gate, walked through the pavement, and as he has approached the mirror image gate on the inside, it says in that verse, there are 8 steps leading up to it. There's a really good argument for the fact there's only 1 extra step leading up to it. Because if you had 8 steps, that makes the extra building, the inside building, even higher, and just mucks up the whole architecture of it. For those who are architects, maybe it doesn't because you can work your way around it. But Henry Sulley argues that maybe it's only an 8th step. So I'll show you from this picture. You walk up the steps, imagine the steps from the outside, walk through the gate, walk through this pavement. Probably take me a few hours to get through there because of the amount of people I'll be talking to and the fun of talking to different people. When you get to the inside, there's an 8th step there. Not so much 8 steps, but an 8th TH step. And I think that's a really good argument for that. Why? Why an 8th step? Why would there be an extra step there? Why is it mentioned here when it's never been mentioned before? Well, because what's 8 the number of? Immortality. It's God's immortal number. And as each step in life is an ascent in life, even in the temple, there's an ascending. You're always going up. So by the time you finally get to the altar up on top of Mount Zion, you've reached the pinnacle of Mount Zion. 7 steps, God's covenant number on the outside. But when you cross the pavement, you're entering the realm of immortality. Mortals can still go past there. But it's a reminder that you're getting close to the most holy. Here's an 8th step. 8, the number of immortality. And for a mortal person, it'll give them the shivers up the spine. We're approaching the immortal people where worship is, where the singers are. Each step is an ascent, brothers and sisters. And we walk up those stairs, it's going to remind us of our walk in the truth today. Each step that we have in life, brothers and sisters, even though we have difficulties at times, is an ascent. Sometimes we feel like we've hit rock bottom. But as Dennis Gillett says in one of his books, no one can ever hit rock bottom because the purpose of God is below that. You know, everything's built on that. Everything's built on rock bottom. Jesus Christ, the chief cornerstone, we're all built into it. You can never hit that. And so it's like a trend line, brothers and sisters, of a stock market chart. We have our good moments, and when we have a bad moment where we think we've hit rock bottom, no, we've hit an ascent. And we keep on going up, we go up a bit more, and we keep on going up. And the temple is teaching you that. That even though we had tough times in life, we still kept on getting up. And that's so important, brothers and sisters, because it's not about you and me, it's about God and how great God is. And when a trial does come our way, well, God's greater than that. God's greater than us. We're so thankful. We have so much gratitude for what God has given us. We keep on going, no matter how much difficult it seems to be. And we always love those words, don't we? Romans 8 verse 17, "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us." And that word reckon in Romans 8 verse 17 is an accounting word. And as Paul wrote that, and he said, you try and add up all the things that happen in life, and you add them all up in an accounting term, and you open up the logbook, and you add up all these things that happen in life, all these difficulties. He says, throw away the book, it's worth nothing. It is nothing compared to the glory that shall be revealed in us. It does not add up, it does not compute. And you'll walk up that 8th step. He that endures to the end shall be saved. How lovely is that? And we'll be reminded of all those things. 8, the number of resurrection, immortality, new beginnings, circumcision, new life. And once you pass that row of buildings, you enter the temple. The temple is round. What's a circle? No end and no beginning. It speaks of immortality as well. It's just lovely, brothers and sisters, that God has placed all these spiritual lessons in there for us to appreciate. So while we might get stuck with cubits and reeds and whatever and steps, there's so much more to that as well. Now, just that, that doesn't really, I've got a slide here and I've seemed to have, I've ad-libbed way too much, so I've actually misplaced a slide here. So I'm going to, yes, I'm not going to do that just yet. Right. Just imagine, it has been suggested that the western, the northern and the southern sections of the, let's just do this better. There, okay. It has been suggested that the north, the west and the south are going to be for dining rooms and tables. So the millions of people that approach each day, the amount of sacrifices that are offered, the cooking that is done, especially in the corner towers, which we'll see shortly, there's actually lots of dining rooms and potential in those 3 sides. The eastern side, there isn't, because that's for the prince and his servants and his saints. That's for immortals only. But for the mortal people, there's all that. So there's 3 stories, which chapter 42 says, and it's 1.6 kilometres in each direction, 3 times 1.6 times 2 plus times 3, because you've got 3 stories, gives you, if you quick at your mathematics, about 19 kilometres of dining tables. How far is it from Cumberland Hall to the middle of the city? 6.5. So, okay, so you travel to the city, you come back again, go back to the city again. There's so many dining tables. It's possible, and it has been suggested that. And we've all been to a wedding reception, and usually it's a largish hall to fit in 150, 200 people. It's obviously going to fit in millions, isn't it? There's so much scope for that to happen. Here's another interesting fact. If all those little chambers in each one of those gates are lifts, there would actually be 528 lifts in the whole place. So you think of that, 528. How are they going to be operated? Is it done by water, Is it done by spirit power? Oh, I don't know. It's quite fascinating. Do you have to push a button? Do you have to say, up please? I don't know how it works, but it's quite fascinating to think of all these different things. Right, let's move on. Now, what I've got here in this next slide, just to finish off some of these dimensions for you. We know that from the face of the gate to the inside, not including the porch, is 40 cubits. All the way to the end of the porch was 50. We know that the pavement from the face of one gate to the face of the other, not including the porch, those dimensions are given, is 100 cubits. We know that the other gate is 40 cubits as well, and I've got the verses there for you. How much does that add up to? 180. Excellent. Okay, remember that figure. Okay, 180. Okay, got it? There's your answer. Right, that's 120 metres. Right, what's this a picture of? Now, I was told last time that not many people knew One Tree Hill, so I've given you a few more One Tree Hill pictures. That's just so you can familiarise yourself with One Tree Hill. That's our hall there, right there on Blacktop Road. Okay, so those who have been there, that's our hall. We've got two halls. We meet in that section there. That's another section which we use for fraternal gatherings and Sunday school. Right. That is the temple. That's how big it is compared to One Tree Hill. Okay, so you thought the first bit was, oh, it's not that big. No, it's actually bigger than that. Okay, let's go a little bit. So that gives you some idea of how big that section is compared to One Tree Hill. Okay? What's that a picture of? Heritage. Excellent. Who's been to Heritage? Everybody's been to Heritage. So this makes it a little bit easier. Okay? Well, we don't have that extra building over there, so they haven't mapped that one out yet. Okay, so that's the outer court compared to that. So next time you're at Heritage, just imagine that most of Heritage College is the outer court. Go a bit more. So there's your corner tower, the outer court, all over that. There's one little corner is Heritage College compared to that. How many children in Heritage College? 350 maybe? Teachers, another 20 odd? Okay, so you get some idea that millions of people are going to inhabit this place. Let's just give you some more dimensions because I know how much you love them. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. Who saw that? You didn't see it. Okay, come with me to chapter 46. Because what about the corner towers? Surely they must fit in to this outer court. Well, they do, and they fit in perfectly. In verse 22 of chapter 46, it says, in the four corners of the court, so this outer court, in the four corners of this court, so it proves it's a square, so that is right, we know that's right. It says, there are these courts joined of 40 cubits long, 30 broad. I'm going to suggest to you that the long there should actually be high. Why? Because it says, and 30 broad, these four corners were of one measure. Well, 40 and 30 aren't symmetrical. Okay, so I'm going to suggest that the long is high, and the 30 should be 30 squared or symmetrical, 30 broad. These four corners were one measure. So one measure, 30, 30, 30, 30, but actually 40 high. The huge problem that we have, and which translators have, is what unit of measurement do they use in verse 22 for this? What unit of measurement is it? Starts with a C. Cubits. Excellent. Is cubits there or not really? It's not. It's in italics, isn't it? I'm going to suggest to you that should be reeds. Now, if you actually made that reeds, and it was actually 40 reeds high, and the base of it was 30 square, which the rest of the verse says, of one measure, what's 30 reeds? How many cubits is that? Someone said 180. Excellent. I heard it. 30 by 30 reeds square, or 180 cubits. That's what we saw in the previous slide. Gate, pavement, gate. It fits in perfectly. The translators, they had no idea what this was all about. So they just threw in a cubits there just for good measure. But if you cross that out and put reeds there, it actually makes a lot more sense. So we actually have a corner tower that fits perfectly into the outer court, 30 by 30, 180 cubits, which we measured, and therefore that long has to be a high. 40 reeds long or high. 40 reeds high, 144 metres. And you think, okay, what does that mean, Rick? What do all those sort of things mean? It sounds good on paper, on slide, but what does it really mean? Okay, well, this is what it means. Here's our corner tower. Uncle John Sivia did this many years ago, and we were so impressed with it, I made a slide of it myself. The State Bank building, which is not the State Bank anymore, what's it called today? Santos building. Actually, it's not. It's the Westpac now, isn't it? Yeah, it changed to the Santos, and then it went to the Westpac. It's almost the same height. if you're a bike rider and you're riding down one of the hills, you can actually stop at a few spots and you can see the city centre perfectly, and the State Bank building there. Just imagine one on each corner of the city centre. You've got Ezekiel's temple there. It is excellent. Just to show you another little hall. What hall is that, you reckon? Golden Grove Hall. Okay, so this just gives you some idea of the size of this. Give you another one. Modbury Hospital is that one. One Tree Hill Hall. Cumberland Hall. Forreston Hall. Okay, so just give you some idea of the size of this. So when it's a house of prayer for all nations, this gives you an idea. Now, what's this a picture of? Yeah, okay, and when you're down the bottom from Darling Harbour looking up there, those people up there look like little ants, don't they? It's a long way away. So when you zoom back a little bit further and you see Sydney Harbour like that, and that boat there is a huge boat. When it came up alongside us, it's huge, it's monstrous. The corner tower, doesn't matter whether it's low tide or high tide, it comes up to about that high. And that just gives you some idea of the cooking that's going to happen in this place. So verse 24 says, he said unto me, these are the places of them that boil. The word boil means to bake, to roast, and to seethe. Where the ministers of the house shall boil the sacrifice of the people. 4 huge corner towers to do that. And they fit in perfectly to everything else. All flesh will be compelled to come to this place. So a large building is needed, brothers and sisters, and this is the largeness of it. When you read all these quotes in Scripture, everybody's looking forward to it. All the prophets cried, how long? Zechariah as well. Oh, this will be the place where I'll make the place of my feet glorious. Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth. All nations bring their wealth here. You know, all nations, everybody brings their wealth to this place. It has to be large. All nations come here to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Unto thee shall all flesh come. All flesh shall come to worship before me. Every knee shall bow to Christ, and it shall be a house of prayer for all nations. This is a large temple for everybody to go there. I had lots of other things here, but I've actually run out of time to do that. So we'll cover some of that at another time. I'd like to finish just in Matthew chapter 6, if it's possible, please. We're going to talk about sacrifices and whatever, but we'll do that next time and get our calculators out for that. In Matthew chapter 6, just want to finish it off on an exhortational note for us all. Because as we said earlier in the class, it's not so much about the building, it's about us being in the building. And every day we have our ups and downs, we have our strifes, we have our challenges. And as we saw at the start of our class, it's about one thing. There's one thing that really matters. It's about God, it's about his kingdom, and it's about being in this place. Well, Matthew chapter 6, Jesus Christ gives us just a few exhortational points from verse 19 to 21 about where our treasure really is. You know, brothers and sisters, I feel for young people these days, it's very hard to buy a house. You know, the world says a little parcel of land is worth so much money. It's hard enough to buy a block of land, let alone put a house on it. One day we inherit the whole lot. The whole bang lot is ours. We inherit the lot. So where is our treasure today? When it's so hard to save up and put money away for the things of this life, and we have all these different goals in life, all these things we want to do and places we want to go, where is our deposit, or where is our riches today, and where is our treasure? So verse 19 says, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth or rust doth corrupt, where thieves break through and steal. The word do not store up there, or lay not up for yourselves, means that don't accumulate. Don't make things in this life your treasures or your riches. We need clothes to wear. Yes, we need a car to drive. Yes, we need a job. We need electricity. We need all these things. But clothes get eaten by moths. Cars will rust eventually. Homes will get broken into. Christ is saying that don't place your trust in these things. Otherwise, if you do, they will become your treasure. So verse 20 says, but lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, where thieves do not break through and steal. The word lay up there means to store up or to deposit. What deposits are you making into your spiritual piggy bank, brothers and sisters? We all put money away, we have bank accounts, we stash money away here and there, we have superannuation accounts and all these things, but what about your spiritual piggy bank? What are you doing about that? What are you putting aside for that, brothers and sisters? When's the last time you finished a Bible marking project? Now, once upon a time, there used to be nights out. We'd have a night out. We're going to someone's house. We're doing Bible marking for the night. You almost don't hear of them anymore. It's a singing night, or it's a football watching night, or whatever it might be. What deposit are you laying for your spiritual future, brothers and sisters? Paul says, set your affections on things above, where Christ sits on the right hand of God. Where is your treasure? Is it in the things that we've seen tonight? Do you want to be there? Is your treasure the truth, the pearl of great price? Is that what's on your mind every day, brothers and sisters? It's hard for mothers when you've got lunches to make, you've got little kids to feed, you've got all these things to do. But really, what is the thing that really matters for you in life, that motivates everything that you do in life, even though it's mundane? It's got to be the kingdom. It's got to be these things, brothers and sisters. Because verse 21 says, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And you know, brothers and sisters, when you catch up with a long-lost friend or whatever, and the first words that come out of your mouth, that will tell you exactly what is in your heart. The things that you talk about will tell you, whether it's after a Bible class, whether it's meeting friends, whether it's after a morning meeting, Sunday morning meeting, should always be about the truth, but not always is. That'll tell you what's in your heart. And so Jesus Christ says, but seek ye first, verse 33, the kingdom of God and his righteousness. All these other things will be added unto you. God will sort out the rest. God's never seen the righteous forsaken or his seed begging bread. We've never gone hungry, brothers and sisters. We must seek the kingdom first and his righteousness. Everything else will be taken care of. So let's set our affections on things that are high from tonight, brothers and sisters. Let's think about this, have a vision of the future. Think of that frame of the city and what we're going to be involved in that place. What are things we're going to be involved in there? And let's make it our treasure. Let's put it in our hearts and write it there so it's never, ever erased or moved.